Welcome to today's video. Thank you so much for joining me. Today we are going to be doing a 24-hour readathon and we are going to be reading holiday romances. We're about halfway through December right now and it's getting cold outside. We got our first snowfall here about a couple of days ago. It just kind of laid on the grass, but it was snow. It melted by the end of the day, but I will take that. By the time this video comes out, we'll probably be even closer to the holidays. And it just seems like the perfect time to be reading some holiday romances and getting into the holiday mood. So let me start by telling you the 8 books that we have for this readathon to choose from. We have 4 physical books and then 4 Kindle books. The 4 physical books we have are A Very Merry Bromance by Lisa K. Adams, which focuses on a country music star Colton and his former girlfriend Gretchen Winthrop. They broke up about a year ago, and now Colton feels like it's time for them to get back together. He thinks that Gretchen is the one for him, and now this Christmas he needs to convince her of that. We have 8 Nights of Flirting by Hannah Reynolds. So this is actually a Hanukkah holiday romance. This follows Shira and Tyler. Shira is determined that by the end of the 8 days of Hanukkah, she is going to finally have a boyfriend. And Tyler is trying to go up his career ladder. So by coincidence, they end up snowed inside the Golden Doors and they decide to strike this deal. Tyler's going to teach Shira how to flirt and Shira is going to make some career connections for Tyler. Then we have A Winter in New York by Josie Silver. This book follows Iris, who decides to move to New York City, kind of for a new start. She ends up going to Little Italy that's having a street festival with her best friend Bobby. She notices this door that she recognizes from her mom's photographs. And she ends up going into this shop, which happens to sell gelato, and meeting Gio. And Gio ends up telling her that his father has had a stroke and now they don't know how to make the gelato anymore because this was a family recipe that only certain people were allowed to know about. After tasting it, Iris realizes that she has that recipe. Her mom gave it to her. She has no idea how she got it. So the book now, I guess, will solve that mystery. And then we'll also see if Gio and Iris fall in love. Then we got Christmas at the Cupcake Cafe by Jenny Colgan. This book also takes place partially in New York, partially in England. It follows Issy, I believe. Yes, Issy Randell, who recently opened the Cupcake Cafe in London, England, and her boyfriend Austin, who is currently on a business trip to New York City. And she realizes that Austin is possibly thinking of moving to New York City, and now she may have to decide between her beloved Cupcake Cafe and her boyfriend Austin. Then along with our 4 physical books, we also have 4 Kindle books that we can choose from. And the options we have for that are Midnight at the Christmas Bookshop by Jenny Colgan, which is set in a old town bookshop in England. So it has kind of like the cozy Scottish vibes to it. We have Blame It on the Mistletoe by Beth Gerard. This book is similar to the movie The Holiday, which is one of my favorite Christmas movies, where a person from England switches with a person from, I think, LA, and they end up, finding people and end up falling in love. This book has the same vibe, only it follows Elle, who's a social media star, and to change up her channel, she makes a request asking for if anyone would like to switch the houses, their lives up, and she finds someone named Holly who's willing to do that. They end up switching places and then falling in love with the guys that they meet in their respective new homes. We also have Once Upon a December by Amy Reichart, and this book takes place in Milwaukee Christmas Market, where Astra Snow ends up ends up dating a man named Jack Clausen. They are having a great time dating around the Christmas season, but now they must decide whether this is a holiday fling or if they're going to go for more of a long-term relationship. Then the last book we have is Christmas at the Borrow a Bookshop by Kylie Dunbar. This book is set in Devon, England. It follows a man named Magnus who's coming down from Iceland to run this bookshop for a holiday, and a woman named Alexandra, I believe, who is leaving her home in Cornwall after finding her boyfriend was cheating on her with her best friend. She jumps on her ferry that she owns and ends up going up the coast and lands in the same town that Magnus is in. And obviously they end up meeting each other, falling in love, but then a tragedy kind of happens to the town where there's a flood and now they must save the town. So those are our 4 Kindle options, our 4 physical book options again. And I guess it's now time to get started on this readathon and choose the first book we're going to read. There's a lot of good books in here that I want to get to, so let's see what our very first book will be. All right, we're going to ask Siri. Hey Siri, choose a random number 1 through 8.
It's 4.
All right, so let's see what's behind door number 4. So that is this tree here. We got 4 right here with a cute little Christmas tree on it. All right, so let's see what's behind door number 4. So we got our piece of paper here. And behind door number 4 is the book, Christmas at the Cupcake Cafe. I'm so excited about this. This is one of the top books that I wanted to read. So here is Christmas at the Cupcake Cafe by Jenny Colgan. This follows Issy, who is taught how to bake by her grandfather and is now carrying on her family tradition at her London eatery. And her boyfriend, Austin, is now scouting for a possible move to New York. So she needs to decide and contemplate the prospect of a long-distance romance with him. So that's going to be our first book of this readathon. It has everything I love. It takes place in Great Britain, which is one of my favorite countries to read romances from. It has cupcakes, one of my favorite desserts, and it's set around Christmas. What more could you ask for? So we're going to get started on Christmas at the Cupcake Cafe by Jenny Colgan, and I'll check in with you a little bit and let you know how it's going. Alright, so I'm back here to do a quick little check-in. We're about 3 hours into my readathon. I took a little bit of a break to have dinner, and I am about halfway through Christmas at the Cupcake Cafe by Jenny Colgan. So I have some things to say about this book. Some good, some a little bit disappointing. So let me start going through that real quick before we get back into it for the second half of the book. First off, I did not realize that this was actually the second book in the series. I assumed the first book is when the 2 main characters, Issy and Austin, first meet and kind of get together. That being said, there's a nice little recap at the beginning of the book that was only a couple pages long that introduced both Issy and Austin as well as a lot of the side characters, so I didn't really feel like I was missing too much on it. And this book also takes place about a year after the first, so while I normally don't like to start books in a series on the second book, in this case I don't think it's like having any detrimental effect or anything. I'm not feeling like I'm getting lost or anything like that. The other thing I like about this, one of the things I like about this book is that there's recipes at the beginning of each or almost every chapter. A lot of them are British recipes, which is nice because my dad's actually from Great Britain, him and his side of the family, and I remember growing up around Halloween, early November, me and my parents would get together and we would make this British Christmas pudding because it had to sit for a long time before it's good to eat. And then when the rest of our family came together for Christmas, we would have that Christmas pudding. Well, not all of us. Mostly the parents would have the Christmas pudding. Us kids would kind of avoid it. But it does bring back memories of that time. So that part I'm enjoying reading as well. The one issue I've had with this book so far is that the 2 main characters, at least as far as I have read, are in 2 separate countries, where Issy is running her cupcake cafe in London and Austin is he has a work travel trip to New York City, so he's spending time in New York City and possibly thinking about moving there. So there's not a lot of interaction, let alone like romantic interaction between the 2 main characters at this point. And for a Christmas, feel-good romance, that's a little bit disappointing. That being said, I do like the 2 main characters, and there's a whole nother half of the book to go. So hopefully in the second half, we'll have the 2, together and see a little bit more of that Christmassy romance feeling. Issy is probably my favorite character in the book. I like that she, works in a cupcake cafe, and I like how her personality comes across in this book as well. So we're gonna get through the second half of the book, see if it becomes more like a true Christmas romance versus like maybe a Christmas story or a story set in the Christmas time period. And I will update you when I get to the end and let you know my final feelings on this book. I'll see you soon. So it's about 10 o'clock at night, and I just completed Christmas at the Cupcake Cafe by Jenny Colgan. Overall, I did end up enjoying the book. I would probably give it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. It's not one of my top 5 Christmas romance books, but it's also definitely not among the worst Christmas books, romance books that I've read. The second half saved this book. There was a lot more romance, well, not a lot more, but there was more romance in it and a lot more of the Christmas holiday spirit in it in the second half compared to the first half, which is what saved this book for me. I definitely want to go back through and look at all the recipes. There's a lot of unique ones in here I want to try out, such as polar bear cupcakes. So I'm hoping to get to do that, hopefully around the holidays when I have a little bit more free time, and see how that goes. So we're gonna go on and choose our second book for this 24-hour readathon. I'm hoping it has a little bit more romance and a little bit more Christmas spirit spread throughout the book instead of just in the second half, but we'll find out. So let's choose a random number between 1 through 8 and see what our next book is going to be. Hey Siri, choose a random number 1 through 8.
It's 6.
All right, so we got 6. So let's find our tree, which is right here. Nope, that's 7 and 8. 1 through 6 is right here, and this is door number 6. So let's see what the next book we are going to read in this readathon is. All right, so we're going to take the piece of paper. And the next book that we'll be reading for this readathon is A Winter in New York. Where did I do with the books? Oh, they're right here. So Winter in New York is the most recent book that's been released on my TBR for this readathon. It's set obviously in New York City, and it follows the main character Iris, who decides to move to New York to restart her life. And while there, she ends up meeting this man named Gio, who tells her that his family-run gelateria that sells gelato is in trouble because his uncle was who recently had a stroke, was the only one who knew the family secret recipe on how to make this gelato, and without him there is no store. So Iris, who was taught at one point how to make gelato by her mother, offers to go sample some, and she realizes that after sampling this gelato that it was the exact same recipe that her mom had taught her, and she's not sure how her mom got it from Gio's uncle, but she offers to help recreate it, and from there the love story starts. So it's the next morning now, and I'm about 150 pages into A Winter in New York by Josie Silver, and I'm really enjoying this book a lot more than I did the previous book. This type of romance is a little bit more my style. We're following the main character Iris. It starts off in a bookshop when she's trying to find a book that she's been waiting to come out. And then we jump forward 9 months, and we're kind of seeing where Iris is now in life and starting to learn a little bit more about her past. She went to New York because she escaped an abusive relationship, and very shortly after we jump forward in 9 months, we meet the main male character, Gio, who she ends up running into because she recognizes the gelato shop that he works in from one of her mom's photos. So I like how the two main characters are thrown together in the beginning of the book, and as we go through the book, there's a lot of interaction between the two, which I didn't really get in the previous book I read. The other thing I really like about this book is that there's a subplot that's kind of carrying the whole romance through the book, and that subplot is where Gio's dad, who's the main character, recently had a stroke and has forgotten the family gelato recipe that has been passed down through generations and is what the family gelato shop is known for. And it just so happens that Iris's mom has that exact same gelato recipe, and this has opened up a lot of questions for Iris. And the premise of the book at the moment is Iris is trying to help Gio figure out this family recipe without letting on that she actually knows it, because she doesn't want to have her mom's secret out there about how she came to have it in her possession, and Iris doesn't actually know how that happened. So there's a little bit of a mystery behind it as well. And I think that always makes romance books a lot better when they're not just thrown in together just because they have to meet, that there's actual like a subplot behind it, why these two characters are thrown together in the book. And the book's also told only by Iris's viewpoint, which is interesting because a lot of times with romances, at least the ones I read, there's usually the viewpoints of both the male and the female characters, and this one is just Iris's. And so from that you get to know a lot more about Iris, but the author also, in the way that she writes, you get these little snippets about Gio's life and who he is as well. And I really love the two main characters, Iris and Gio. There's nothing really annoying about them, and they seem very authentic. And then the other thing I love with this book is just the Italian background with the gelato. I lived in Italy for 2 years, and it kind of brings back memories of the time that I was living in Naples. So many reasons why I love this book. I'm excited to continue on. I find this a much easier and quicker read than the previous book because it's kind of written the way I like romances to be written. Nothing against the previous book. It's still a good book. It's just not the type of romance book that I like to read. So I will check back in with you when I'm either a little further in or when I finish it, depending on what's going on. And I will see you shortly. So I felt now was a good time to do a quick check-in. I have about a little over 100 pages left in A Winter in New York, and the stories really has gotten going since I last checked in. There's definitely been some romance, some spicy romance, though not like super, super spicy. And the conflict that's going to come in that third act is definitely becoming apparent. What's nice about this book is I sometimes have issues with that third act conflict in romances. A lot of times it seems that it just needs to get shoved in there because that's what romances do. But in this book, there's a couple conflicts going on, and you can kind of see where they were coming from straight from the beginning. It doesn't seem like it was just forced in. It was more of a organic growth of what the conflict is going to be. We haven't reached max point yet, so I'll see how I feel once I hit there. But so far, like I said, I'm still really enjoying this book, enjoying the character, and I'm really excited to see how this book turns out, how the conflicts come to a tipping point, and to see what happens to the two main characters, Iris and Gio. So I'll check back in once I get to the end. Like I said, I have a little over 100 pages to go, so I'm excited to see how I feel once I finish the book. So I finished A Winter in New York by Josie Silver. I absolutely adored this book. I would give it a 4 out of 5. And it's definitely more of a winter romance than a Christmas romance, though Christmas was included in the book. It didn't really center around Christmas. I enjoyed how the book ended, and I liked how Gio acted at the end of the book when the whole big conflict and everything happened. It didn't turn me off or anything, which sometimes the conflicts do, but this one did not. I also really enjoyed how Gio's family was included in this book, his sisters, his parents, his daughter. It fleshed the book out even more and gave it a nice family feeling and made the stakes even higher. I was reading through Goodreads as well, and like I said, I love this book. This is a 4 out of 5 for me, but reading the Goodreads reviews, a lot of them were saying that while they enjoyed this book, it wasn't one of her stronger books. And this being the first book I ever read from her, now I really want to go and read some of those other books if people are saying they're even stronger than this one. So if you've read any books by Josie Silver before and have any recommendations on which ones I should read next, leave a comment below so I know which ones to check out. The other thing this book does include a gelato recipe. I was getting a little worried as I got to the end because I love gelato, like I said, having lived in Italy for a couple years. So I am interested to try this recipe out. We'll see how that goes. So that is A Winter in New York by Josie Silver, 4 out of 5 for me. So now it's time to choose our final book of the readathon. There's a couple of books I'm really hoping I'm going to get. One is Blame It on the Mistletoe, which is not based on, but is similar to the holiday Christmas movie, which is one of my favorite romance Christmas movies. I watch it every year. And then there are a couple of books that are set in the bookshop, which I also think would be fun to read. So let's see what we get for our last book of the readathon. We're going to choose a random door 1 through 8 and see what's behind it. Choose a random number 1 through 8.
It's 1.
All right, so we have door number 1. So here's door number 1. You're going to open the door, get the piece of paper. All right, we got the piece of paper. And the book that we will be finishing off this readathon is Christmas at the Borrow a Bookshop. So you might have realized at the beginning of this video, I said that the book was called The Borrow a Bookshop Holiday. Well, that's not the one set in Christmas. This one actually is the one set in Christmas. It's book 2 of the series. The books in the series look like they're standalone, so that's where we're going to start with the second book since this is the one that's set at Christmas. So Christmas at the Borrow a Bookshop by Kylie Dunbar the series is based on the idea of renting out this tiny bookshop in a small English harbor town for a couple of weeks and running the bookshop. So in this book, Magnus is an Icelandic ex-bookseller who decides to rent out this bookshop just to get away from things that have been going on in his life. The other character, Alexandra Robinson, also finds herself in this small town stranded, and there's really nowhere for her to go, so she settles into this town and is kind of taken in by the townspeople. Then around Christmas time, there's this great flood, and it's up to both Alexandra and Magnus to help the village build itself back up. So that's kind of the premise of the story. I think it's a pretty short story too. Yeah, 292 pages, so it should be a pretty quick read. It is on my Kindle, so I'm going to go download the book and get started. And I'll check in when I am into the book and can let you know how it's going. So I will see you guys soon. So I'm about halfway through Christmas at the Borrow a Bookshop. It's an okay book. There's nothing that really jumps out at me that it's a must read for me. It's probably going to be one of those books that I read, say it's a good book, and then kind of move on. The two main characters are Alex and Magnus. Alex is a ferry boat woman. I don't really know the title, but basically she owns a ferry that she takes tourists and other people on in a town in Cornwall, England. Then one day, I guess she comes back and finds that her boyfriend is cheating on her, and she ends up jumping on the ferry and just taking the ferry up north to a little harborside town in Devon, which is where she ends up. And then Magnus, who is the male character, is a former Icelandic bookseller. His bookshop ended up failing, and several months ago, his brother had, as a joke, got him this vacation where he gets to run this bookshop in what happens to be the same town Alex ended up in, the little harborside town in Devon. And so he is there running the bookshop while Alex gets stranded there, and the two end up meeting. And that's kind of where we are. The romance is starting, and we'll see what happens after that. There's nothing that's really jumping out at me in this book that makes it, one of the best romance books that I've read. It's kind of like my run-of-the-mill romance books. It is set in winter. It's set around the holidays. It's set in the UK, which are all things that I like. But other than that, the two main characters are enjoyable, but nothing that really makes me fully invested in them, I guess you could say. So I'm going to go on and finish the second half of the book, and I will check back in once I finish that, and then we will wrap up the video after that. So I'll let you know how I feel once I get through the second half of this book. So I actually completed the readathon last night. I finished our last book, which was I already forgot the name. Let me get it right. It was Christmas at the Borrow a Bookshop. So this book was okay. It wasn't one of my like all-time favorites. I would probably give it about another 3.5 like the first book I read during this readathon was. I enjoyed the premises of it. There wasn't a lot that really held me, especially in the first half of the book. It got a little more interesting at the end, but the beginning was a little bit slow. I enjoyed the premise of the book. I wish that we got to know the characters a little bit better. Not that we didn't know them well, but I just felt like they could have been built up a little bit more, I guess you could say. And I wish there was more to the ending of the book. I felt that there was a lot leading up to the big issue, but then I felt that that big issue could have taken up more of the book than it did. The third act conflict that we see all the time in romance books wasn't even really present either, which the author specifically wrote in her notes that that was done on purpose. So that was fine. I just wish that the big issue that happened at the end of the book was kind of started earlier on, so that we got to see that a little bit more versus it just being like really crushed together at the end. I thought that would be kind of a better story because it did take a while to build up from the beginning of the book. But overall, I will give it 3.5. It was a good book. It's just not a book that I'll probably read again, but I did not hate it. The writing was fine. It just wasn't one of my all-time favorite books, which is okay. Not every book can be. So just as a recap, the other 2 books that we read this 24-hour readathon was also Christmas at the Cupcake Cafe by Jenny Colgan, which we also gave 3.5 out of 5 stars. Again, for similar reasons, the characters weren't as built up as I thought they could be. That could also be this was the second book in the series, so they may have built them up more in that first book. And then also because the 2 main characters were on 2 different continents for most of the book, so you didn't really get a lot of romance in it. Again, it is the second book of the series, so they were already together. It wasn't like a build up to them getting together, which could be why we didn't see a lot of romance. But for a romance holiday, I would like the 2 characters to maybe be in the same town for longer than they were in this book. So that was the second book we read. And then my favorite book of the 24 hours was A Winter New York by Josie Silver. Like I said, I absolutely adore this book. I love the characters. I love how there's character growth. I love how the characters were written. And I loved all the side characters in this book as well. I felt like they'd had just enough build up to get to know them, but not so much that they take over the book, if that makes any sense. And then when I did look at the Goodread reviews, a lot of them said that they enjoyed the book, but it wasn't one of her best books that she's written. This was my first book I've read by her, and hearing that actually makes me want to read some of her other books. So if anyone has read any Josie Silver books and has a good recommendation of what book I should read next by her, please let me know in those comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video. I definitely had a fun time recording it, doing it, and I definitely enjoyed all the books I read in the 24 hours. We made it through 3, which is not too bad since, I took time to sleep. Sleep is important. My next videos coming out will be, I think, just my my TBR game for January. I have a Around the World recap coming out too. I'm not sure if it's going to be released. It might have already been released before this video. If not, that should be coming out at some point as well. And then I may do just a quick 2023 recap of all the books I've read this year. In January, for my reading vlog, I am going to do a Dark Academia. I think instead of doing it in 24 hours, I'm going to spread it out throughout a week though, because I feel like reading Dark Academia for a 24-hour vlog, those books are a lot longer than romance books, and I feel like I may only get through 1 or 1.5. So I think spreading it out over kind of like a 5-day period to read as much as I can on that genre will be the best way to do that, but I'll figure that out when we get into January. I hope everyone has wonderful holidays, and I will see you in my next video. I hope everyone has enjoyed this video. If you have, please hit the like and subscribe button so you can see more videos by me, and then otherwise I will see you in my next video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!